And welcome everybody to another, I think it's episode 3010 of the Bangers and Classics podcast. That's with me, James Rupper, and him, David Malloy. And that was some party last week, wasn't it, David, at Kenny's?
It was indeed, yes. I mean, I'm still recovering from it. I mean, I don't know how you got home. They had to pour you into the sleigh that was waiting outside for you.
Well, there you go. I think it was just the size of Kenny's garden that got me. It was absolutely huge, but there you go.
Was that a garden? I thought it was a county.
No, well, there you go.
Anyway, James, yes, 3010, a podcast odyssey, is it?
Yeah, something like that. It might even be more than that. I don't know. I've lost all sense of time now, David, with these podcasts.
I've just lost all sense, basically.
Have you?
Oh yes. Anyway, we must say thank you to Kenny anyway for his hospitality.
Yeah.
And the car that won, I must say a couple of words about that. The Alpha 6 is absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? Yeah.
There's very few of those left. I think that's the only one on the road in the UK. It's the only one that was licensed anyway. Yeah. There are a few on Sorn. They only made about 12,000 Alpha 6s, but the car in the photograph is a Phase 1, which is the prettier. They obviously Alpha gave it a makeover and they didn't improve it, unfortunately. It's a trick Renault seemed to have specialised in, and Alpha also went down that line. But it's the very first incarnation of the Busso engine. Yeah. Which was a longitudinal 12-valve engine in that installation. And it eventually ended up with a transversely mounted 24-valve engine. And it's probably, at least in my opinion, the greatest motoring engine ever made for a road car. I'm biased because I've had one, but they are that good. The sound they make is just, well, it's sublime. Moving on to slightly more somber matters. Yeah. We lost somebody this week in the world of motoring, and particularly motor racing. Lost one of its favourite sons, Frank Williams. What can you say about Frank Williams, James? I mean, great personal fortitude. He became a quadriplegic after a car crash, returning from a testing session. He was driving a Ford Sierra, it left the road, and unfortunately, poor Frank sustained life-changing injuries, which he dealt with remarkable fortitude. What's your thoughts on Frank Williams?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, you can focus on the sad parts, but I do remember at the time that he did say that he'd lived sort of most of his life in one way, and now he was going to live it in another, and that was quite an incredible way. I don't know whether I could be as relaxed about it as that, and maybe inside he wasn't, but at least he thought, well, I'm not going to let this change what I'm doing. I mean, a lot of people would, but there you go. You know, the team went on to greater things. So, you know, what a marvellous example to everyone, never mind the engineering genius that he was. But I know that you know all the background, David.
Well, apparently that's what he said to his wife. I've had 40 years of one kind of life, now going to 40 years of another. And he very nearly made it to 80. He was 79. Yeah. And I believe may have been the world's oldest quadriplegic, which speaks volumes. From as a young man, he was a racer. He lived in a flat in London with some very colourful characters from the racing community. One of whom was Piers Courage, who was a scion of the Courage brewing family. And he and Frank became very close friends. Frank and he bought into a Formula 2 team, started a team. Frank ran him in Formula 1, finished second in the Monaco Grand Prix. Unfortunately, Piers Courage was killed in an accident in 1970, which obviously devastated Frank because they were very, very close friends. But he continued. He ran his own F1 team. Money was very, very tight. At one stage, the phone in the factory was cut off for non-payment, and they had to use a telephone box down the road to take incoming and outgoing calls. Money arrived in the form of Walter Wolf, but Frank Williams found himself really just being a team manager rather than a team owner. So he walked away and started a new team, which was Williams Grand Prix Engineering, along with a chap called Patrick Head, who was a genius designer. And rapidly they moved up the order. 1979, they really made the big breakthrough. I was there at Silverstone the day in 1979 when Clay Regazzoni won Williams Grand Prix Engineering's first Grand Prix. It should have been Alan Jones who was running away with it, but his car broke down. And for the next few years, certainly between 79 and 82, the Williams was the car to have. Then you had the fallow period. But then, obviously, came 86. You had Mansell and Piquet in the team. What a team that was. Frank Williams had his car crash that season. But the team remarkably went on to even greater things. Mansell won a title, obviously, later on. Piquet won at 87. Prost won a title. Jacques Villeneuve, Damon Hill, Ayrton Senna drove for the team. Juan Pablo Montoya, Ralf Schumacher. They all went through the team in the space of quite a few years. But Williams was a very competitive, very strong team. It had fallow periods. It always came back. But from the mid-2000s onwards, it did struggle. There was one last hurrah when Pastor Maldonado won, I think it was the Spanish Grand Prix in 2012. Frank then decided to step back and let his daughter take effectively day-to-day charge of the team, and that the team was obviously sold. But it still bears his name.
Yeah.
His triumphs when the team were incredible. He and Patrick Head were the driving forces behind that team. They built it from the ground up and turned it into a powerhouse. There's one great story, though, I'll share before we move on. Alan Jones was the first superstar Williams driver, as it were. They took a bit of a punt on him. He was a good driver, but he hadn't really had significant success when he went to Williams, and he excelled there. He became one of the finest F1 drivers in the world. And his attitude, his straight talking, down to earth Australian manner, fitted the team well. He became a template for Williams drivers. And many years later, David Coulthard drove for Williams, and he tells a story about being told by, I think it was Patrick Head, to drive more like Alan. And he thought he meant Alan Prost, who had driven for the team, but no, it was Alan Jones. He wanted him to be a bit more meeting to the veg, get up and go, get on with the job, get it done. And that was it. Something about Frank Williams, I'd simply say this. He was a racer's racer. I don't think there's any higher tribute that can be paid to him, because I think that's how he would want to be remembered.
Yeah, very well said, David.
Moving on to perhaps a less sombre topic, is any word on the Caroline Munro situation?
No, David. Obviously, I'm waiting for feedback on this, but she's a very busy lady. She's got a lot of things on. So come the time and the place, obviously, I will take the Mini Cooper back to a reminder of many years ago. So no, not at the moment. But I found that Talking Pictures TV have got quite a lot on their plate. They're running a TV station, and there's only 3 of them. So they've got tons to do.
We could help them out.
Well, we could do, but it's. But I mean, there's just one person who runs this podcast, and and that's quite a lot on your shoulders, David. So you can imagine what it would be like running a TV station, even though you have proposed the Bangers and Classics, radio station, the Bangers Classics, TV, and the Bangers and Classics newspaper. But they will all occur in time.
And the film studios.
Yeah, and the film studios, absolutely.
Racing team.
Yeah.
Car manufacturing.
Yeah.
Yeah, ice cream. We're going to make ice cream as well. We've got to do that.
No, absolutely.
Yeah, but going back to Caroline Munro, maybe you should offer to take the Innocenti. She's probably never been in an Innocenti before.
Maybe not.
Yeah,
no.
just a thought.
Okay.
Anyways, moving on to car spots. I've got a couple this week. I saw the garish green local MX-5 with the bizarre wrap and the hardtop. One headlamp seems permanently to be in the raised position. It's got less ground clearance than the snake's dangly bits, but it is actually being used on the road. So congratulations to who that is. You're clearly a very brave man, sir. That's all I'm saying, because there was no ground clearance on that car whatsoever. Anyway, moving on to more acceptable to me cars. I saw 2 very contrasting Tram Spitfires, both in driveways. One was a rusty yellow one with a rusty hardtop. That would need a fair bit of work to get back to the road, if it's ever going to. But by way of contrast, there was a very nice red one, also with a hardtop, in another driveway. And that one does seem to be in use, and it does look in spiffing condition. I also saw a Mark II MR2 in a driveway. Again, I think it needs a bit of work to go back on the roads. Its red paintwork was very faded, which reminds me of the Lotus Elan M100, which was available in a colour called Calypso Red. But the first paint formulation, because I think they changed suppliers, did fade, and wags now know that colour, not as Calypso Red, but as Collapso Red. Yeah, it's a kind of similar situation with that. It really is very faded. But it did seem to be intact. There seemed to be not too much rust, if any, protruding. No holes, etc. No really big, ugly rust blemishes. So perhaps it could be returned to the road. Don't know what it's like underneath, of course.
No.
So what about you?
Well, David, for you, a Lotus Elan, one of the M100 ones. I knew it was one of those because it took up all of the road as it came towards me, because obviously they're extremely wide. So it was quite nice to see. There was an Aston Martin behind it. So I don't know if there was some sort of if there was something going on there, but it was 2 interesting cars in one. But it's always very nice to see an Elan. As I say, it may live in Norfolk, but you actually don't see that many Lotus around. So that was very good, and obviously it made me think of you, David. So that's always good.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a pleasure. Otherwise, on the banger front, I was followed around for most of the day, it seemed to be, by a Ford Escort 4-door, 1991 on a J, which I don't think would be the best time for those, but it was in decent condition. There was no rust on it, and it was being used as a daily driver. And when I did see the driver, he was on the ancient side, so he'd obviously had it from new, I would assume. But yeah, he was using it properly. It had a full complement of plastic wheel trims as well. It was a fairly basic model, like an LX or something. But yeah, it was a car being used, which is always good. And then finally, another car you don't see very often, certainly with 4 doors and not a tailgate, is a Volvo S70. And that seemed in quite tidy condition, but again, a car regularly being used, and it was good to see it that it hadn't been swept away in some part exchange or other deal to take older cars off the road. So yeah, 2 bangers and a classic, so that's not too bad from my end.
Yeah, a couple of scrappy scheme survivors by the sound of it.
I'd have said so.
Yeah, I mean the Escort obviously must have been in spiffing condition from what you're describing. It probably was owned by that chap from New.
Yeah, I'd have said so.
Yeah, you can imagine that some people do that. They get cars and they do look after them ever so well, and my hat goes off to them for doing so.
Yeah,
I always wish I could do that. I've never actually bought a brand new car. Now I think about it.
No. Well, that goes for both of us, David. So yeah, we don't need brand new cars when there's bangers and classics about.
Absolutely not. No, the trouble is most of the classics I bought turned into bangers.
How do they?
It seems that way sometimes, yeah, but that's another story. Anyway, on that note, we shall take a break. You're listening to the Bangers and Classics podcast, presented by James Santa Ruppert and David Rudolph Malloy. And we are back after that break, and we're going to jump into this week's Banger or Classic segment. Then we're going to talk about a car that came out in 1991 and has gone through the generations and indeed is still with us. It's the Renault Clio, but specifically we're dealing with the first generation. So, James, Nicola Papa, banger or classic?
It's a classic, I think, David. It's certainly a banger. I don't know whether it's being appreciated as a classic at all, and I don't think you have to go down the Williams route at all, which is quite funny that we're mentioning that. But I think you can look at the more basic ones. You can look at the Monaco versions, wasn't there? There was definitely one of those, wasn't there? But it's what the French do best, and what Renault used to do extremely well was small cars, and that is a very good small car. And you would think after Renault 5, very hard act to follow. But actually, they ran together, didn't they, for a while? Because you could get both models. You got what was the basic Renault 5 called? I can't
Campus.
Remember. Yeah, that's it. You get the Campus for a few years, but no, I mean it was a move on, and it was a very very good small car, which is actually what most people need. And obviously it was better than the Renault 5 in some respects because you got a couple of extra doors if you wanted them, so that was always good.
I was more of a fan of the 5, to be honest, I have to say, than the Clio.
Yeah.
I did go to look at a Clio to buy one day. It was a 16-valve Clio.
Yeah.
I went to look at it, and I couldn't get comfortable in it. The 19-seat, you could rotate, effectively. You could pivot it. You couldn't do that in the 16-valve Clio. And that was it. Not interested from that moment onwards. The other thing with the Clios, and indeed the 19s, was, as I recall it, they had a nasty habit of snapping the clutch cables. There was a cable-operated clutch, and the clutch cables would snap. It happened in my 19, I remember that. And I seem to recall it was quite a big problem in Clios for a little while. The cables would just suddenly snap, and you would have to drive to the garage, being very careful, making clutchless changes because you had no alternative. You go back to 1991, you go back to the sequence of adverts, and a couple of comedy legends appeared in the final advert. Do you remember who they were, James, out of interest?
No, it wasn't Morecambe and Wise, but...
No, you're close. You're not that far away. Reeves and Mortimer.
Reeves and Mortimer, right.
Yeah. I won't say any more. You should check it out. Or if you want, you can buy my most recent book because the story's told there.
Yeah.
Mini plug. The thing about those ads is they were filmed, obviously, starting in 91, and it makes you feel old when you realise that the young lady who played Nicole in it is now 30 years older than that. I'm not going to say what age she is, because I actually do know. It's bad manners to reveal a lady's age, but you do start to feel a little bit more venerable when you think to those first ads, and you can remember the ad, and you think, blimey, that was 3 decades ago. I don't know about you, James.
Well, yeah. I mean, the past is another country, David, and as you know, I'm a great believer in time travel, and you can do that. You can do that in your head, or just thinking young. Just don't pay attention to what's in the mirror, and just carry on with your life. And
I don't read the mirror, so I'm not worried about
no,
that. No. Anyway, back to the Clio.
yeah,
A bit underwhelming for me. I didn't think it was as cute as a second generation 5.
mm,
Yeah, you had the Williams version, which I wasn't, again, a great fan of, simply because I really couldn't fit properly into the blooming thing.
mm.
So I was much happier with my 19. But going on an objective basis, and it is a classic. I'll have to give it that much. But I still wouldn't want to own one, simply because I couldn't fit in it properly. If I could, then it'd probably be a very different story.
Well, certain cars aren't designed for freaks of nature, David. I think that's something you have to accept.
Uh-huh. Well, that still excludes me, though, old son. Shocking thing to say. I'm mortally offended here.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, I'm going to go and cry in my big pillow now. There's a film reference there, but I don't know if anybody will get that one.
Well, I didn't, so there you go.
Ah,
You have to explain it later.
I'll tell you later. Yes,
Yeah.
if you remind me. Anyway, moving on and talking about films. Actually, that's a bit of a link. We've been talking about Christmas presents recently, and you very wisely last time around brought up the concept of films to watch at Christmas.
Yeah.
And we talked about that. Well, is there any great car films to watch at Christmas? Or any great films that feature cars? And of course, there were loads. And I thought of 3. The first one is Full Throttle. It's from 1995. It's, I think, a BBC production that starred Rowan Atkinson as Tim Birkin, who was a Bentley boy and a winner of Le Mans. I think he won it twice. It made the low budget, but very enjoyable. And Rowan Atkinson was very good in it, I have to say. The only problem is it's not available on DVD at the moment. I don't know if you can track down a copy somewhere, but if you can, it's certainly worth spending some time with. It's very enjoyable. With a big budget, I don't know if they'd have done it any better, to be honest. That's the problem. They captured the feel of it, the feel of the era, and Atkinson really did play Tim Birkin very well. For me, it's just ideal. Second one is, you might like this one, James, Caravan to the Car. It's from 1974. It's a thriller based on an Alistair MacLean story, but MacLean himself apparently wasn't too keen in the film to the extent that he didn't turn up to the premiere. But this is it. I think I mentioned this before. Graham Hill is in it as a helicopter pilot. How bizarre is that? Graham Hill as a helicopter pilot. Because I was watching a clip of it the other day. I was actually looking for some information about the helicopter for something else I was doing. I thought, blimey, that looks like Graham Hill. I thought, that is Graham Hill. Why is he playing a helicopter pilot? I haven't found the answer yet, but it's definitely him. Beyond that, there's also a gorgeous, very early Fiat X19 in a few scenes near the start. And it's well worth looking at. You just think, what a striking little car it was. And again, that was an affordable sports car, James. We talked about these things before. That, you can have a sports car. It was good in fuel. It was fast enough for what you needed. And it was very stylish. What more do you want if you're a young man? Really?
Exactly. Yeah.
And the last one is, of course, I've got to mention it's the Italian Job. Not the 2003 aberration, but the 1969 original. You've seen it before. We've all seen it. But there's tons of stuff to look out for. There's Crystal Palace Circuit. There's the now no longer existing DER house. The bus. And I think I mentioned this before, but if I haven't, did you know, James, that the bus ended its life being used as a school bus in Scotland?
No, I didn't. Although the bus also is supposed to have ended up in my mate's sort of the back of his yard. And he was a mini specialist. He said, "Oh, you do realise that's the bus from the Italian Job?" And I thought, I don't know. It is, but that would have been in the middle 1990s. Do you know when it was being used as a school bus?
I think it expired about the middle 90s.
Yeah,
it was scrapped.
Well, maybe he scrapped it. Then I'll have to ask him.
I think it was scrapped up in Scotland. It was in the East Coast somewhere. I've seen photographs of the bus. Yeah. It was a bus company that owned it. They didn't use it exclusively as a school bus, but it was used for the school run. But I have seen photographs of it in its then livery. It's a damn shame, really. I mean, I think somebody eventually realised what it was, but it was too late. It was too far gone to save. But imagine that it could be taken to school in the bus from the Italian Job. How amazing would that have been?
Well, can you imagine all the people who would pay cash money to go on the Bangers and Classics tour in the Italian Job bus? We'd take them around the sites.
This is why you're the commercial supremo, James. You know all these things. There was one more thing from the film. The Aston Martin later appeared in an episode of the Benny Hill Show, and it's still around today, turns into a Lancia. It's a very, very clever disguise, but if you actually use your freeze frame and your sort of step advance on the DVD player, you will spot it. So there you go. 3 films for Christmas. What about you, James?
I've only got one, David, because that's me. But I reached into my own personal library and I pulled out Repo Man. I don't know if you've ever seen Repo Man.
I've got Repo Man, yes.
You've got Repo Man. Oh, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I can't believe that anybody who doesn't sort of slightly like cars hasn't heard of this, but it's a very good film. It's an indie film. It's from 1984. It's directed by Alex Cox, and it's got Emilio Estevez in it, but mainly it's got Harry Dean Stanton in it, who's fantastic. And they're repo men, repoing cars. So it's the dirty underbelly of Los Angeles, where they're taking cars. And they repossess one car, which is a Chevy Malibu, which has a secret in the boot. And it's quite hard to explain the plot, really. Emilio's a punk. It's probably the best film he ever did, I would say. And it's quite interesting. I think one of the most fascinating facts I found out is that all the products in the home they look like value products. So it's got like cornflakes is just written in big writing, and Coke is just written on it. So it's all big printed letters, and you think, oh, that's some clever comment on consumer society. But actually, it was apparently all down to the fact they tried to get sponsorship from people who supplied these things, and they couldn't get sponsorship. So as a sort of a soju, they just thought, oh, we'll just put bread on bread and tea, or coffee on coffee. So that's what it was. And but there's a lot to enjoy in the film, and if you've never heard of it, you will be in for a treat. It is a bit weird, but it is wonderful. I think it's very well shot. And it's got a Chevy Malibu in it, and there's a few other Chevys in it. A lot of old crappy cars, really, American cars. But there's an awful lot to enjoy in it as well.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. It is a strange film. I saw it back in the 80s when I was a teenager.
Yeah,
and didn't like it. Then about 3 years ago, it was for sale in the shop, so I bought a copy, sat it down, and thought, this is great. So there you go. Your taste can change. Perhaps I just didn't appreciate what it was getting at the time, all the nuances in it. But it's just a film. Just sit down, enjoy. Yeah, it's mad, but so what? Life's mad. And Alex Cox, you might have heard of him. Obviously, as a director, film director, he did various things. I think one about Sid and Nancy as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
but he, for a generation, might remember him as a host of Movie Drome on BBC Two back in the day. Yeah, and it was thanks to Alex Cox showing Assault on Precinct 13 that I became aware of it. Saw it for the first time. Saw him that much. He didn't like Assault on Precinct 13, of course, and I absolutely love it. But there you have it. He still introduced me to it through his TV programme, and the rest is history, as I say. So we shall move on then and take another break. This is the Bangers and Classics podcast, presented by a proper motoring journalist and a complete chancer. And we are back, and we're going to use the time machine that Mr. Ruppert spoke about to go back to films, because James wants to tell us about a film he thinks is great for Christmas. I don't know the film, but I'm going to check it out, and I would recommend that you do so as well, because he's seldom wrong about these things.
I don't know. I'm wrong about most things. But it's not a particularly Christmassy film. But it's, in a way, it's sort of a comment about modern times. You can, but it stars Peter Cook, and it's called The Rise and Rise of Michael Rimmer, and it's a fantastic slice of late '60s sort of stuff. Really, I mean, the film is rich in detail. Arthur Lowe's in it. John Cleese is in it. There's actually another Hammer horror actress that I can try and bother, which is Valerie Leon is in it. And basically it's probably his best part, Peter Cook. Peter Cook should have made loads more films, but he's definitely the star of this in so many ways. But he plays a PR man who basically becomes sort of in charge of Britain, which is very strange when you consider the trajectory of people in modern politics. But the great thing about it is that there's lots of late 60s detail. There are cars in it. There's an old Rolls Royce in it, FX4 taxis and stuff like that. Great street scenes, as we always enjoy. But it's just the quality of the writing in it, and it's, yes, as I say, it's got all the great people from that sort of era. You even got Harold Pinter is in it as well. Graham Chapman's in it. Ronnie Corbett's in it as well. So they all sort of pop up. But there's sort of fantastic street scenes there. And as I say, it's a comment on modern life, really. But they sort of predicted sort of how, I suppose, stupid we would become. If somebody says the right things, we'll go and vote for them. But it's Peter Cook at his very best. He's quite aloof in it. He's not cracking jokes all the time, but he's being sort of fairly evil. In many ways, he's the Bond villain that we should have had. So the Rise and Rise of Michael Rimmer, I bought it on CD a few years ago, and I would hope it's still available on DVD anyway. But yeah, it's one. If you haven't seen it, David, I may well post you this one.
No, I'll find a copy, James. Thank you.
Okay.
No, Peter Cook. Oh, yes, what a man he was.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting character indeed. Yeah. We don't make films like that anymore.
No.
You look at the cast in that film, James. Wow. It's the cream of British comedy talent by the sound of it.
Yeah, no, it is. Everyone's in it, everyone.
And again, that's an era when there were a lot of funny people about, and script writers came up with genuinely funny scripts. Sometimes, they were a little bit contrived. Sometimes they were out there, but they always got a chuckle. That was the thing. They knew how to make people laugh, and making people laugh is a great gift. People laugh at me, but that's laughing at me, not with me. So
no, that's right.
We're not going to go there either. Just for today.
No, I mean, if we were going to talk about Peter Cook, I can only recommend the original Bedazzled. There was another Bedazzled a few years ago, but the original Bedazzled is an exceptional film. If you ever get a chance to find it, there may be cars in that as well, actually, and Eleanor Bron. So there you go.
All right, crikey.
Oh, and Dudley Moore. And it's mainly Dudley Moore pursuing Eleanor Bron. With Peter Cook as the devil. So,
yeah, old Dudley Moore. He was in a film when I was a lad, which bizarrely I think got an X certificate, which meant it was suitable for people of 18. There was nothing in it to make it suitable for 18-year-olds. I don't know why it got an X, but a bunch of us from school, we were about 16, we sneaked into it. Back in the glory days, that was the height of our revolution. We're going to revolt against society by sneaking into a film that we're too young to see legally.
Yeah,
we did that a couple of times. I think we went to see Stripes as well when we were too young to see a Bill Murray film, and got away with it. So that was it. We probably thought we were striking some sort of great blow against the man, but instead we were sneaking in to see films that weren't supposed to. So yes. Anyway, don't stay in the subject of films. This chap's been. We're going to talk about, or not going to talk about, rather, has been a few films. It's an antique dealer from East Anglia.
Oh, right.
And he's not Lovejoy, and he's definitely not played by Ian McShane. Okay, I've been asked to point that out.
Yeah.
Though I do have a mate who looks like a less craggy Ian McShane as Lovejoy. He really does. It's the guy I was at school with.
Yeah.
If you imagine a less craggy Lovejoy, that's my mate. I better not say his name, because he works for a very high-powered company, and he'd probably send the boys around to me or something like that. Anyway, this chap, this unnamed East Anglian antiques dealer, has asked us, in the politest possible terms, to find a suitable classic car in which to transport his wares to the auction house. And as he put it, it must be classy, reliable, and no, not too bad in fuel. He's got £10,000 of other people's money, I think, to spend on it. So I come up with something, but I no doubt you'll better it. So I want to hear from you first.
Oh, I don't think so, David. I've, as usual, completely misunderstood the brief and gone down a very bizarre route. But antique dealers, David, always used to have Volvos. I don't know if you realise that, but that's what they used to have. I mean, obviously, in real life, actually, antique dealers have panel vans and Luton vans, because otherwise they wouldn't get anything in. But yeah, in the old days, they had Volvos. And as we know, they were quite capacious. All the seats went flat, and you could get a fair amount in the back, actually. And the Volvo V70 is very good. I have owned a Volvo V70, which was very good and had lots of room in it. But in particular, I think the R version. Now, I can't claim to have been on many car launches really, but I did go on the launch of the Volvo V70R. It was on the Autobahns of Germany, so you could go mad. You could go as fast as you wanted to, and it was quite interesting. And yeah, it was a couple of hundred horsepower. I think they're 265 bhp, and that would seem to be a very uneconomical but quick way to get your antiques from one end of the country to the other. So I think Lovejoy might appreciate that. I know he's used to having, or as you said, it's not really Lovejoy, but somebody like Lovejoy who quite possibly had a Traveller Morris Minor. But yeah, I found one because you explained to me the other day, because I always thought I could keep the difference, and you explained to me the other day that I couldn't. So I've spent most of it on a 1999 Volvo V70R. With 76,000 miles, which is quite low for a Volvo. All Volvos of that era seem to be on a million miles at 9650. It seemed to be very, very tidy and in decent condition. So that's my modest submission. But I'm sure you've beaten it, David.
Well, I found what I think is an absolute gem, purely by chance, and it's a 1997 BMW 323i E36 Touring with an automatic gearbox. It's £3,000. It's on Car and Classic, and believe it or not, it's also done 76,000 miles.
Goodness me!
The advert says it is a full service history, full leather. It's sort of tan leather, air conditioning, set to look and drive amazing, no rust anywhere. And again, the photographs, it does seem to look as described. There was a Cat D in the past. It says due to front bumper and bonnet damage, but there's no structural damage at all, no signs of repair. And I've looked at it. Oh, that's a really nice looking car. And then I looked at the MOT history, and it goes way back close to 2005. And I think there's no evidence it's ever failed an MOT in that time. I think there's only one advisory once for something like a tyre. And you think that car was definitely not built on a Friday afternoon or a Monday morning, and probably has been very well looked after. It's a nice shade of red, a sort of metallic Bordeaux colour. Is that Cinnabar red, the BMW call it? I can't remember.
They did, yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But it looks really good condition. And if I was in the market for a classic estate car, joking aside, I would certainly consider that one. It is, in the photographs anyway, if the description is accurate, and I have no reason to think that it isn't, then it looks fantastic. I have to say, engine bay is nice and clean. The interior looks lovely. Carpets at the back, the road area look great. Probably too nice to be an antique dealer's car, to be honest. This is maybe one to buy and cherish.
Yeah.
For that money, I mean, what else are you going to get, really? There's one more thing to do in this week's podcast, and that's to talk about a car we sort of mentioned a few weeks ago, and we were going to talk a bit more about, and due to some idiot, i.e. me, forgetting, we never did. And that was a car that you mentioned, James, called Bohanna Stables Nymph. And you were going to say what an ugly car it was, weren't you?
I did, and I'll stand by that. That's my hill to die on today. But you're going to put me right, David, because you know the full exciting story.
I know a fair bit about the story. I don't know every nuance of it, but it was designed and built by a couple of people who were real car guys. Peter Bohanna came from a boat building background, but he then went to work for various companies. I think he worked for Lola at one point, and he met up with a chap called Robin Stables, who was a sort of design engineer, who also at one point worked for Lola. Around about the year of the T70, they joined forces and designed a sports car, mid-engine sports car, called the Diablo, and they built it themselves. They got the chassis fabricated, designed the body. The only one was ever made because AC bought it, and it turned into the AC 3000 ME, even though it was very unlike what Bohanna and Stables had come up with. Only the basic shape remained. Anyway, Bohanna and Stables went to work with AC for a time as consultants, but they moved on and decided to create what was effectively a British equivalent of the Miari, or if you like, their version of the Moke. There was a car called the Nymph, an open car which you could cover over. Rear engine, because it was based on Imp Mechanicals and Imp chassis. It was featured in Hot Car magazine that you're fond of, James.
Right.
There was a fairly substantial article in Hot Car about it. An article about somebody who'd built one back in the day, telling you what he had done to the car and where he'd got the parts. And it's all very interesting. That was the idea. You could build this car, you could buy it as a kit. You built a rusty old Imp, got some essential parts of it, stuck this nice new shiny fiberglass body on it, did a bit of work to it, and lo and behold, you had a nice lightweight utility vehicle. Really a buggy, I suppose you could describe it as in a way. Obviously, it was using tried and trusted mechanicals. It should have been a success. It wasn't expensive to buy. It was built in Britain. I think they were produced down near High Wycombe. But here's the rub. There was an order allegedly came in from Chrysler for several thousand of them. Now, I don't know the exact figures. I'm waiting for a certain gentleman to get back in touch with me who may be able to tell me that answer. But one figure is 10,000, another figure is 4,000, which would have completely transformed the fortunes of Bohanna Stables. Unfortunately, around about that time, Chrysler USA seems to have decided to get rid of the Imp. So, with no car to base it on, Chrysler decided not to proceed with the order. I don't think it was actually all signed, but there had been discussions about it. And the plan would have been to market it in warmer countries as a rival to the Mini Moke and the Miari. And in the end, only about 46 or 47 of these kits were made. There are some still in the UK, there were some still on the road. And I did write a piece about it for a magazine a few years ago. And it's a very interesting story. It seems to have been the swan song for Stables and Bohanna in the motor industry, though. They went and did other things. I know Peter Bohanna was involved in a project to cross the Atlantic by balloon in about 1980 or so. I think it was sponsored by ICI. If you look that up, it's quite interesting. You'll see his name attached to it. And he was involved. He made props for films as well. So there we have it. The Bohanna Stables Nymph. If you get a chance to buy one, I'd probably take it because they're so rare. But the running gear is standard Hillman Imp running gear. You shouldn't have any trouble getting that. It's a fun and funky little vehicle. Best used in dry days, obviously, and best used in the summer. But it's certainly very different, James.
No, I can't argue with that at all.
And its looks are
interesting.
Yeah, different. It definitely looks different. Again, because it's based on another vehicle, there's only so far you can go with the looks. There's only so many changes you can make to it before you get into serious re-engineering.
Yeah,
which a small company wouldn't have the financial clout to do.
No, that's right.
But they made it look sufficiently different to the Imp to give it a personality and a flavour of its own.
Yeah.
But it does what it says on the tin. It's a fun, funky little car. I like it. I've never driven one, sadly, but from what I've seen and what I've read of it, I definitely rather like it myself. But then again, I'm a fan of the Miari, as you know, and I would be a fan of the Mini Moke, except I can't fit in the blasted thing. Don't know if I can fit in the Imp either, mind you.
Well, I think we should compile a list of the cars you don't fit into, David.
It could be quite a long list.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Even a Volvo Estate. I could drive it, but there was no blooming legroom.
I'm beginning to think that you do make a fuss, and maybe this is for attention, but
No. I like the quiet life, old boy. I'm not the one who chases after hammer horror actresses and Bond girls, etc.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, that's right.
You're the flamboyant one.
I've got to do something. I've got to have a hobby in my old age, so I'll make it that.
Yes, I just think you're naturally flamboyant, James. That's all. I can imagine you back in the 70s with your platform soles and your flared trousers, etc., and your kipper tie.
Yeah.
Did you have a kipper tie?
Yeah, yeah. Everything was flared in the 70s.
Nostrils?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, hairdos.
Yes.
Shoes, flared shoes.
Yes. Anyway, we're going completely off tangent as usual, as has become the custom in this podcast. It was originally about cars, but we're not quite sure what it's about these days.
Yeah, personal abuse, I think, David, it's descended into. But
I'm being nice on it. I'm always nice on it. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, as ever. I hope that you join us next week, and we hope that your preparations are well in store for Christmas. I'm reliably informed by Mr. Ruppert that he is not Santa Claus, but I'm not entirely sure that's the case. Maybe he'll tell us soon.
I don't know about that, David, but I'm off to bother some hammer horror actresses apparently. But there you go. Try and find the surviving ones.
Cheerio.
Cheerio, everybody.